Call the May 15th, 2018 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Troy to order. It is 7:30 p.m. And before we take the roll call, because we do have visitors here tonight, and obviously there are some people who are watching either at home live now or they'll watch it later in the archives for this public body, I think it's important for everyone to know who's here and what the role is of the people up at the head table and on the side dais. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Mr. Lambert, who's a member of our board. I'm Glenn Clark, the chairman of the board. This, to my right, your left, is Mr. Desmond, Mr. McCauley, and Mr. Agawas. And we'll address this a little bit later about the people that are not here. They may be arriving late, so they'll be participating if they do arrive. We are allowed under our procedures to operate if we have quorum, and that's 4 votes. So clearly we have 4 votes here. But we will ask the petitioner if our colleagues can't join us before we start taking action, then we will ask if the petitioner would like a postponement for the next meeting. They can request that. They don't have a right, the petitioner does not have a right to that. The board has to consent to that. And over on here on the side is Mr. Evans, and he represents the city administration, so he'll be providing our administrative oversight here tonight. And then at the very end is Mr. Motsney, who during daytime hours serves as an assistant city attorney for the city of Troy, but for our purposes here tonight, he does serve as our legal advisor to this public body. And this is, and just arrived is Ms. Kupa, who is a member of this board, and she's also our liaison to the Planning Commission, where she serves as well. And without any further ado, we can ask for the roll call. Mr. Evans, we're prepared for that.
Mr. Clark?
I'm here.
Mr. Agawas?
Here.
Mr. Desmond?
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher? Mr. McCauley?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Kupa?
Here.
So we do have quorum. We will proceed with business. We have rules and procedures here at this board, and it may be odd and different from any other public body you've experienced. So we do like to address the rules and procedures so everyone fully understands before we ask for participation from the public and so forth. So I'm going to call on Mr. Lambert to read those rules and procedures which have been previously approved by this board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with their name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, so for example, a next door neighbor or live behind the property, and then state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant does have the right to appeal the board's decision to the Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. So I'll make it obvious for anyone who wants to participate tonight how that's going to flow as we move forward, and it's pretty basic. So we now move on to the item of number 3, approval of minutes related to the April 17th meeting of this year. Are there any questions or concerns from a member of the board? Or would someone like to be recognized for possible action. Mr. Lambert?
Chair, I move approval of the minutes.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Ms. Koopa seconds that motion for approval. Is there any discussion from a member of the board? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Agawes?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Abstain.
Mr. Eisenbacher? I'm sorry, Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. And before I call the vote, can I just call on Mr. Motsney? So we've dealt with members who vote an abstention. Can you just address that really quickly before we move forward?
Yes, a lot of times people want to abstain from voting in the minutes because they weren't at the meeting, but technically you can vote on the minutes even if you weren't there. And that's especially important if we're short of a quorum without the vote, because technically you have the ability to approve the minutes even if you are not present at that meeting. So.
Well, then yes.
So record...
I thought I was being good there, but I guess...
Let the record reflect that Mr. Desmond has cast a yea vote. So the chairman states that a motion is approved. We do move on to item number 4 related to the approval of the agenda. So this isn't a hard vote. This is just setting the agenda amongst the fellow board members. I would like to add one item under number 7 in addition to the agenda, which would be 7B. And we're going to call on our legal advisor, Mr. Motsney, to address the Michigan Open Meetings Act, which is the law of the land. And he's going to have some information for us there. Is there anything else from a member of the board? Okay, seeing none, this agenda has been set with that one addition. We do move on to item number 5, and that is the hearing of a case related to 4021 Wentworth. Mr. Evans, could you please present to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would like to direct everyone's attention to the monitors at the front of the room. This is an aerial view of the neighborhood. 4021 Wentworth is the property outlined in yellow here. It's on the west side of Wentworth. This area is north of Waddles and east of Beach Road. Now, the subject property and all the properties seen in this map is zoned and used for single-family residential, or of course it's vacant. That's a close-up of the neighborhood showing the proximity to the property relative to everybody around it. And the subject matter involves a shed that is located in the backyard. Now, this is a survey that was provided by the applicant. Wentworth is on the right, and the shed is located in the southwest corner of the yard there, circled in red. This is a picture of the structure, and the ordinance says that accessory buildings, including sheds and structures like this, are limited to a maximum height of 14 feet, and they can only be 1 story tall. This particular structure is 2 stories tall and calculates to a height of 18 feet 5 inches. It should be noted that the city did receive a complaint regarding this. It was discovered that this shed was built without receiving a building permit. If the board were to grant a variance for this shed, the applicant would be required to come in and seek a building permit, and we could work with them retroactively to get that where it needs to be. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is there a member of the board who'd like to ask a question? Mr. McCauley?
When were they notified from the city about this?
We sent them a letter January 10th, 2018.
Does this structure have electricity, heat, plumbing?
We don't show any permits indicating that, but maybe the applicant could also clarify that for the board.
Okay. And this, so we found out about this because of a complaint?
Right.
Okay. Now I'm looking at this. So has the building department even looked at this? Is this considered a structure? As another dwelling potentially?
No, we would consider an accessory structure based on what we know. Now, certainly if we found out that there was living capabilities, kitchen, sleeping area, bathroom facilities in there, then potentially it could be considered a second residence. But right now, it would be considered just an accessory structure like a shed or a garage.
So it hasn't been inspected for any of that stuff?
Right, we just don't have the answers to that.
Mr. Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Evans, during the process, assuming the board gives the variance and during the process of pulling the permit, Does the city have any obligations as far as inspecting it for safety purposes?
Yes, that would be commiserate with everything involved. So for example, we have stairs here. The city would look at that in regards to safety and really anything else inside. Whatever needs to be looked at, we'll look at.
Thank you.
Mr. Desmond?
Is there any kind of statute of limitations scenario at play here at all, or is that not?
I don't think so, simply because the structure was built under what is today's code. The same codes were in effect. And the proverbial cart is before the horse. They constructed, it's not clear to me what rights somebody might have since they constructed without a permit.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. McCauley?
This information that we have here, is this their original building permit?
Right, they did receive a building permit for a shed in about the same location, and I provided copies of that permit and some items out of the permit file to give you an idea of what was permitted at the time, and this, it was either modified or I think this actually replaced it.
So this is what they gave you, is what they were looking at putting on there originally?
Yeah, this is what the city approved back in 1999.
So I'm looking at these other pages, this is what they submitted with their application number.
Right, those are actually part of the permit documents. Mhm.
Okay.
Looking at this building permit, it's William Joseph Wallace is the owner of the property, so is this actually a permit pulled by the current owner or previous owner?
Well, according to this information, the applicant and owner are Mr. Wallace, but that's what the record shows. If there was a different owner at the time, perhaps the applicant might be able to enlighten us on that.
Any other questions or discussions by a member of the board? Okay, we'll call the petitioner forward. Please identify yourself and state for the record what your relationship is to the property in question.
Hi, my name is Ann Percy, and I am the owner of the property.
Good evening.
Good evening. I have just a brief statement. Is that
Sure,
okay?
please.
All right. I've been a Troy resident for 14 years and a Troy business owner for 28 years. My son graduated from Troy High. My daughter's about to graduate from Troy High. My kids have been involved in Troy sports. My husband, when he was alive, used to help coach, and we've supported Troy sports. I appreciate you hearing my variance request tonight. The tree fort has been up, we call it a shed, we call it a tree fort. It's been up for 9 years. There was a shed there. The permit was pulled by the previous owner. It was there when we moved in. So he just upped the footprint, and he originally had talked to someone from the city about a tree fort, because when we moved in, he had promised my kids he'd build them a tree fort, and the tree fort sort of morphed over to the shed and got bigger than it should have. I didn't handle the construction of it. I was unaware until we got the letter from the city that we didn't meet code. I did not have any idea about that. The lot is deep. The tree fort is sheltered by the trees in the back of the lot. I did update the survey upon request, and it complies with the setbacks from the property line. It's been very well maintained. The bottom is used to store our lawn tractor, tools, garden equipment, things like that. The top half right now is used to store these furniture for my deck, which I haven't gotten down yet, and it's used in the summer. The kids would use it to play games. They would have spas there. My daughter would have spas and tea parties. Boys would play games in there. I provided you with a couple of pictures of the building of the shed. There's a picture of my kids with a television. They ran an extension cord out from our house up to the tree fort the first summer that it was finished, so that they could use that as their little clubhouse, and neighborhood kids would come over and hang out in it. Some of the neighborhood kids even helped with the construction. There have been no complaints for 9 years. The reason that there's a complaint now is because my neighbor's adult children's pit bull jumped over the fence and bit my German Shepherd, and I called animal control and reported it, and within a week I got the letter from Mitch Gruznek that I had an illegal structure on my property that I didn't know was illegal up until that time. I have a typical suburban backyard. I think this adds to the backyard. I don't think it harms anyone. I have support from a lot of my neighbors who I believe sent emails, and many of whom are attending tonight, which I very much appreciate. And I would respectfully ask that you grant me a variance for my shed tree fort. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you could just stand there for just 1 minute. Is there a member of the board who would like to inquirer of this petitioner? Mr. McCauley.
Okay, this goes back to your question. It says William Joseph Wallace.
That's who we bought the house from.
So this structure, that original one was just a shed. You did this afterwards, so it made it bigger, made it better.
Yes.
Supersized it.
Yes.
Is there heat in that?
No.
Plumbing?
No.
Electricity?
No.
So then basically you guys didn't pull a permit to do that?
Apparently no. In every good marriage, you have division of labor, and that was not my part of the division, so.
I understand. I laugh because you're right.
Any other member? Mr. Lambert.
You said your youngest child is getting ready to graduate from high school.
Yes.
Obviously, they're probably, your kids are at the point in life where they're not going to be probably using the tree fort a lot. What do you envision using that for going forward?
Keeping it until, like, we have grandkids that come over, or, if any of the neighborhood kids want to use it. We have a really tight-knit street, and our neighbors get along very well for the most part, and, neighborhood kids have come over and hung out there before, and I'm happy to have them do that. I don't plan on ever making it a living. No one's going to live out there. They put sleeping bags out and slept on the floor. We have that indoor-outdoor carpeting stuff that you can get at Home Depot on it, but it's not for living.
Any other member of the board? Okay, if you could have a seat, please. Thank you very much. So this time we're going to call the public meeting open. So if you'd like to address the board on this matter, I'm going to call you forward in just a second, but I think it makes sense, since we have a mountain of paperwork that came in via email, it may make sense that we recognize for the public's consumption and the board members' consumption that we are in possession of these communications, that we in fact did receive them, that we understand the nature of them. So why don't we, I'll call on Vice Chairman Eisenbacher to give that report, and then if you were one of the people who communicated with us electronically, then you may not want to come to the podium, but you have that right. So we never have a closed door policy. You have a legal right to address this board if you want to come to the podium. In just a second. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Okay, we have 13 letters on the table. All are in favor except for one. So it's 12 in support and 1 opposed.
Thank you. And that's inclusive of everything we got tonight and in our packet?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, 3 were duplicate on the table that match the 3 in the packet.
Okay. So we are now going to call forward anyone who would like to address the board on this matter to be on the public record. In favor of, opposed to, or just general comments? Anyone who would like to address the board, you have to step forward. I don't call from the gallery, you just step forward. And then please identify yourself for the record.
Sure.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Denny Gross. I live at 4005 Wentworth, which is right next door to Ann. If anybody were to have objections to the structure, there you can see my house, it would be me, because it's closest to my back property line. I had no objections when it was being built almost 10 years ago. I have no objections to it now. It's a very attractive looking structure. It's landscaped nicely, and right now with the trees leafing out, I can barely even see it from my back deck. So I have no objections to it being there, and I respectfully ask that you do grant the variance to Mrs. Percy. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mario Talvacchio. I live 2 doors away from Percy Residence at 4053. I've lived there 44 years. I view the structure as more of a tree house. It's well built. And I don't consider it just a shed. And certainly I have no objections to it at all. I therefore request that the board approve the variance and allow the structure to stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Rob Wilson. My wife is Betsy Wilson. She's sitting back there. We live at 4148 Wentworth, which is right above the 4068 house. So it's down Wentworth and to the right. I've known the Percys for a very long time, and I support you granting a variance for that property.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board on this matter? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Li Huang. I live across the street from Ann, 4020. And my younger son is a classmate with Jack. And Percy's, after they moved in the neighborhood, they helped the neighborhood big time. During the snow winter time, the late Mr. Percy used to drive a tractor to clean up all the sidewalks. And they are good neighbors. And the kids enjoy the tree house. And even my dogs enjoy their yard. So I support the variant. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the public like to address the board on this matter? Hello.
Hi, good evening. My name is Piero Simone. My wife, Lucy Simone, is sitting with me tonight. We're at 4101 Wentworth, just a few doors down from the Percys. We've been in the city now since 1999. 3 children. My daughter Madeline, who's 20. I have a senior in high school at Troy High, and I have one to be a freshman. They have all played in the tree house or playhouse or clubhouse, whatever you want to call it. We have a very close-knit neighborhood. It's been a wonderful thing to have it there. I wish that you would grant the variance. It's been wonderful for our kids to be able to have a place to play. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the board on this matter? Second and final request, if you'd like to address this board on this matter, please come forward and be identified. Or recognized, I should say. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on that matter and bring it back to the board for further discussion, inquiries, or possible action. Would anyone like to be recognized?
I got a question for...
Sure.
When did you buy the house?
Please, you can't address from there. You have to step to the podium.
I apologize.
It has to be on the public record. Thank you very much.
We bought the house in 2004.
2004? Okay, thank you.
Do I sit back down?
Why don't you wait for just a second? We'll just see if anyone else... We don't want to give you too many calorie burns here. And would anyone else like to address the petitioner?
I would. One of the criteria by which we create motions to allow a variance to happen is through hardship. Has anybody talked to you about hardship? Are you familiar with the concept of how that fits in with this? I mean, basically, can you define any hardships that would allow us to craft a motion that would allow the granting of a variance?
I don't think I have a hardship. What I'm kind of hoping for is that you'll just relax the ruling a little bit and grant me the variance. It's not an odd-shaped piece of property or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Actually,
Ms. Koopa?
it's not just, a hardship is one way of describing it. We say practical difficulty. So if you could identify a practical difficulty that you have.
I don't know that I have a practical difficulty necessarily. The old shed was next to the tree. The tree fort morphed into the supersized shed, and that, I guess, is my practical difficulty. If I moved it somewhere else, it wouldn't still be part of the tree.
Did we talk to her?
You can address her when she's done here, yeah. Any other member of the board? If not, I think you have someone waiting for you.
Okay.
So if you can have a seat, thank you. We may recall you up here to the podium. Would a member of the board like to be recognized?
Sure.
Mr. Lambert.
Question for Mr. Evans. The height requirement, where exactly, do you know how old that part of the city's ordinance it is? Is it related in any way to the monster garage ordinance that was adopted 10, 15 years ago?
I don't know. Didn't research that.
So Mr. Monsty, please.
I don't believe the height requirement changed. We changed the ordinance after the monster garage issue to make a distinguish attached from detached accessory structures, but I don't believe we changed the height.
So if I could just ask the petitioner to be recalled to the podium, please. So I appreciate your words earlier. I understand a successful marriage is various members of the marriage party doing different things in tandem for the overall good. But sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. Usually that kind of gets married up later in the evening before bed, you know. What was your day like? Well, I was building a monster shed or whatever it was. But that isn't always communicated. I know. I had, two parents who were married for a long time, and obviously it's unfortunate your husband passed, so my condolences to you. So if I understood properly, you had no knowledge of the zoning ordinance and or the violation or the non-adherence to it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I just didn't think about it because it wasn't...
Sure. I mean, I probably would have been in the same category. I'm not a big details guy. So at the end of the day, at the time it was built, you were co-owner with your husband, is that correct?
Yes.
And then now you are still the owner, or...
I'm still the owner.
You share with, so anyway,
no,
okay, great.
Just me.
So it seems to me, and tell me if I'm seeing this wrong, something happened to the property that changed the thing in the back, that you knew obviously things were going up because supplies were purchased and delivered or picked up and, piecemeal worked on. And eventually, voila, this thing is there. And you were probably chasing after kids and errands and all those other good things that a spouse does in tandem with the other member of the marriage. So it seems to me that the practical difficulty is this thing did emerge on your property without your consent, but certainly, or when I say consent, meaning you didn't sign off of a violation of the ordinance. But you are still now the recipient of that thing that's there and the property owner, and the ability to make any decisions moving forward after, fully in your own right after your husband passed. So, I mean, is that kind of pretty much summing it up? Because
yes, I do think that sums it up. Yes. And it would be a difficulty to have to take it down and put it back to a one-story, and to, and frankly, there's a lot of sentimentality because my kids built that with their dad, and he's gone now. So that's kind of a, there's that.
Yes.
That would be difficult, explaining to the kids and what. I mean, they know it's a possibility. My daughter's singing in a concert tonight right now. My son's in East Lansing and has 3 jobs this summer, so neither one of them could be here, or they would have been.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm done with you, but I think maybe we have somebody else here who'd like to address you. Mr. Desmond.
I'm sorry. You keep referring to this as a tree house. Is there a specific tree this is connected to in some way?
Yes, there are other pictures, I think, that did I not submit other pictures?
On the table, lower right corner.
Like where the stairs are there, the stairs go right up into the tree, and
so that's a specific tree that this is connected to?
Yes, it's specifically attached to that tree.
In Section A of our Statement of Practical Difficulty, we have exceptional characteristics of property for which the variance is sought make compliance with dimension requirements substantially more difficult than would be the case for the great majority of properties in the same zoning district. Characteristics of property which shall be considered include exceptional narrowness, shallowness, smallness, irregular shape, topography, vegetation, and other similar characteristics.
Vegetation then would be a problem.
So if this, I mean, to not have this connect to that tree, I mean, is that a practical difficulty if you're making a tree for it at that point? I mean, am I stretching here, or like, is there something in there? Like, because I mean, basically, if you're making a tree house, it has to be in conjunction with that.
In a tree. It started as a tree house, and kind of got big, because my husband never did anything halfway or without doing it absolutely correctly.
I mean, I see that, and then...
He created a ski, downhill ski hill in your property.
No, that was not my
Seemed to be a very
property.
creative fellow.
That was my neighbor's property.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That was a couple houses down. But yes, he did. He created a luge kind of thing. Yeah, he was very creative with that kind of stuff. Loved working with tools and with his hands and pushing snow for the neighbors and all that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, between that and Section E, that the variance will not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which it's located, will not impair adequate supply of light to adjacent property or unreasonably increase congestion of public streets. I see options in both A and E.
Okay. If you could hold on one more second. Anybody else for this petitioner? Ms. Kupa.
Mr. Motzny, are there any other instances of where we've put the cart before the horse and granted a variance?
You mean after the structure was built? Yes, we've done that.
Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Yeah, building
For the petitioner? Or,
no,
okay.
just
does anyone else...
looking at our rules.
Hold on one
Okay.
second. Does anyone else have anything else for the petitioner since she's here? Okay, if you could have a seat, please. Thank you very much. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Yeah, looking at our rules, practical difficulty must be clearly related to as many of the 5 standards below as possible. You talked about A. I believe it meets A because it does affect the vegetation, and the vegetation is part of the structure. I believe it matches B because this is a variance for the property in question. It's not another location. I believe it matches C. It's not of a personal nature. It's for a structure. And E, based on the volume of input from the neighbors, will not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located, and it won't affect the adequate supply of light and air to adjacent properties, or increase congestion, or cause any dangers for fire or public safety, etc., etc. So following the items that are outlined in our guidance for our scope of what we can do, I believe it's met, barring any objection from my colleagues. I would like to move for approval.
Second.
With
Hold on.
My bad.
Because this isn't, we're not permitting this to grow twice as big or 3 times as big as the future. For the footprint that exists now, and for the duration of ownership by this homeowner. If that's not too much of a stipulation.
So you're asking for like a deed restriction, so if she sells the house, then it goes?
Mr. Chair, the first condition is appropriate.
The second we can't.
Second condition, variances run with the land. You can't impose a time limit on a variance, so the second condition would not be valid.
Okay, so then for the existing footprint of the structure and its, I guess, including the stairs and all the supporting parts.
I have a question.
Hold on, I'm sorry, you're out of order. So that's, Mr. Desmond, I think, wanted to be recognized for the purpose of second, but that's the beauty of allowing the author to fully state his working motion until a conclusion. So now, before we have any discussion, the proper Robert's flow is for it to be seconded or it dies. So
I'll second it now.
Okay. Very good.
Jumpy, sorry.
Yep, that's okay. That's quite all right. So it's been properly moved by Eisenbacher, seconded by Desmond. And now, Mr. McCauley, you have discussion?
I've got a question regarding, is it possible to put a deed restriction on this? If the property was sold, that structure comes down at that time?
The variance would be a matter of record, so it's actually, I'm not sure if we record those with the Register of Deeds, but it would be a matter of public record, so all previous owners would be, basically have notice of the variance. So that would be, so it's not a deed restriction, but there would be public record notice of the conditions of the variance.
Okay, so let's say they sell the property, how's the new owner going to know that that needs to come down?
Well, that's the point, that you can't do that second.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's what I was explaining. The second condition is not a condition of this variance because we cannot impose a time limitation. So that condition is no longer a part of the variance as I understand it.
Of the motion, yeah, so that's no longer in the motion. And as Mr. Monsney described, it will run with the land. So that would be there potentially forever without it being forced to be taken down. So, Mr. McCauley, do you have more discussion?
Yeah,
Sure.
I struggle with it. And I understand because I built one very similar for my children, and then when we sold the house, we had to take it down. And the reason why we had to take it down because it didn't comply, and I understood that. The sentimental value of it is gone because I'm no longer at that property. So from my standpoint, I understand the sentimental value as they are living there, as their children have outgrown it and not used it. That'll diminish over time, and then when the property comes to be sold, all those memories will be gone too, in a sense. There'll be memories, not aspects. So I'm looking at this that if we can somehow work this, that it comes down when the house is sold, because I hate to open the door for future ones. We granted one, but not another. As far as we're trying to stretch these practical difficulties, I'm struggling with every one of them. I just struggle with it, even though I understand the sentimental value of it and everything else. And that's the part that I'm going back and forth with. So I would like to not get in that situation.
Any other further discussion? Mr. Gauss.
I hate being that guy, but I'll be transparent. I'm going to be voting no, and I hate it because I see the sentimental side of it, I see the emotional side of it, but we're stretching and stretching and stretching the qualifications of why to grant a variance, in my opinion. I don't see a practical difficulty. I don't see a hardship. It was caused by the current owner. I wish I could. I wish your neighbor had never brought this to us in the first place. It seems wonderful. But I don't like the precedent that it sets, in my opinion, that we ask for forgiveness before permission. And we've done it before a couple months ago with a house that was built too close to the side yard. And I felt bad about granting that one, as a matter of fact. And this one, it's a simple no, but for all the sentimentality with it. Otherwise, if you took out the emotional side, it's not even close.
Thank you. I would just like to add that, I mean, I really do hear both sides here, and I hear from the neighbors and the petitioner. We did deal with something like this on this board many years ago, and I don't remember if anybody of my fellow colleagues were on that board at the time, because it was a long, long time ago. So it was the shed on my street at the time. Well, no, it's a separate patch of asphalt, but it goes into that area, and Milverton Road. And the neighbor, who I did not know, he was about almost, maybe it was even a half mile away from me. He and his wife put up they took down a dangerous shed. They had young children, I think 3 children. And the thing was rusting, and that jagged metal was a danger to those kids. So he did what a good father would do and try to mitigate their exposure to that. So he put up a better shed. And I remember the argument was, when he bought the larger one, it was kind of an eyesore to the neighborhood that all these kids' toys were strewn all about. So he felt that the neighbors would actually like all the toys and play stuff to be, away and not under eyesight. So the board did, Mr. Lambert, were you on the board at the time? Do you remember that one? Okay, so we did grant the variance because it would have caused him to tear that down. And the neighbors in the area did not object at all because they were getting what they wanted, less, eye pollution of all these toys. So, and I think I voted yes on that. The way I look related to that, there are some similarities here. It's really not total apples to apples, but when I hear the story about how one property owner, one co-owner was completely unaware and then now still holds that property, it's as if she's a new property owner and that happened from a previous property owner. I know that's technically and legally not the case, but I think in a sense morally it can be argued that way. And really what we're talking about here is holding this lady harmless to a decision that she had nothing to do with, as far as the wrong decision, building it too high. So I am going to vote in favor of the motion. I think we do get in these complex situations, and as the British call it, a sticky wicket. And it's just it's not an easy in and it's not an easy out, but I think at this point in time I'd feel comfortable casting a yes vote in that regard. And I understand others who are coming from a different perspective, because I'm always concerned too about setting down this wishy-washy, no foundation to the ordinances. I think we do a pretty good job of that, and we have for many years. So, but those are my thoughts, and my thoughts are equal to, there's 6 other votes here, and we'll see what other people have to say. Anyone else would like to be recognized at this time? Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
I don't want to speak twice before other people do, but you jostled my memory. We also dealt with a tree house on, I believe it was Trombley, next to the drain that had been constructed, or was in the process of being constructed.
Yes, that was not
and we granted a variance for it because it was on the stream easement, but they got permission from the Drain Commission.
Yes, that is indeed. In fact, that was about a year ago, or
no, it was more than that.
More than that.
2 or 3. I don't have my laptop.
I wasn't on the.
Time flies, I guess.
2 or 3 years ago, I believe. And that turned out to be a nice tree house.
And I would also argue that if we listen to the residents, you see this paperwork, there's one objection, but overwhelming support. And when the one lady, the neighbor lady, mentioned that, obviously there aren't leaves, unfortunately, on Michigan trees all year round, but they are now out, and that's the time when people are enjoying their property, their deck, their family, entertainment in the backyard. It seems like the trees take care of the issue, and it makes it almost completely invisible and or not easily seen or identified. So that's why I feel comfortable voting yes. Ms. Krupa.
I understand, Mr. Argawis, because I also struggled with that house that we had to approve because it was a cart before the horse. But I think we need to look at it in the whole context of all of the variances that are granted when the cart is put before the horse. I think that one was a house. This is something that we've not known about for 9 or 10 years. And as Mr. Clark just pointed out, there's 13 out of which 12 are okay with granting the variance. I would be comfortable going forward, but also putting more work on Mr. Motzme so we can see how many we have granted, so that maybe that gives us a measure for the next time something comes before us, that we're more prepared. Because I would like to see what the benchmark is. Because I understand the point is that we don't grant a variance so that we're always granting variances. I mean, that our board is here to limit the variances that we grant. So maybe we should understand better why it happens. And I've talked about this before, that we can't know everything everywhere. And obviously for 9 years we didn't know about this. So I think I would be okay with granting this one.
Anyone else like to be recognized? I had the pleasure of speaking to a member of City Council just the other day, And I talked about the colleagues I served with on this board, and the pleasure of serving here is that people can have varying opinions, and it can be very civil and very professional, and I think we accomplished that. I don't know how this vote is going to go, but that's the great thing about working with these this lady and these gentlemen, is that they're just a total class act, so I appreciate them. So I don't see that there's any more discussion or debate, and I think, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
No.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Agawas.
No.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Motion passes. Congratulations, you have your variance. You can stay and, you can't comment at this time, sorry. You can stay and watch the rest of these exciting proceedings, or you can feel free to enjoy the summer evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the choir concert.
This next item are communications number 6. And Mr. Evans, do we have anything to communicate?
We do not.
Okay, very good. So then we move on to item 7A, and remember we have item 7B here momentarily. And at this time, we are going to entertain the election of officers. We have a vice chairman to elect and a chairman, and as I reminded everyone last meeting, it's really the first person out of the gate's discretion to connect those two with one motion for chairman and vice chairman, or if somebody would like to, introduce a motion to elect, the chairman and vice chairman, all they have to do is enter a motion that is supporting a particular person for either office. We can take it vice chairman first, chairman first. It's really at any member's discretion. Is there a motion that someone would like to make? Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to re-elect Mr. Clark as our chairman.
Second.
Motion and a second for Clark for chairman. Is there a second motion for chairman? Seeing none, we are prepared for a vote, I believe. Mr. Evans?
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Agawas.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Thank you to my colleagues for your confidence, and I would like to open up the floor now for a motion for vice chairman. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
I would like to nominate Mr. Daniel Agawas for vice chairman.
There's a motion for Agawas for vice chairman. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. McCauley, seconded that. Any discussion on the motion? Did I call a discussion for the other?
No.
I guess I didn't. I don't think that it was necessary, but everyone was being quite quiet. But is there any discussion on this motion for Mr. Agawas? Mr. Lambert.
Is the question for Mr. Eisenbacher, by making that motion, you're not interested in serving again as vice chairman?
Correct.
Okay.
Take turns.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Agawas.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Agawas. You will begin serving as vice chairman at the next meeting of the board. And just for statement to Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher's comments about rotating, I have had some discussions with some folks, and I won't stand for election as chairman again next year. So there will be a new chairman. I don't know who that would be, but my colleagues will be able to make a fully informed decision 1 year from tonight's meeting on that office. Moving on to Mr. Motsney, I would like to call on him to address the Michigan Open Meetings Act.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. It came to our attention, when I say our attention, the city attorney's office, that there was apparently a meeting of this board, and after the meeting closed, there was people talking about various things, and someone may have mentioned something that happened at the meeting, and there may have been, or something that should have happened at the meeting. It probably wasn't a big deal, because under the Open Meetings Act, I wrote this down because I didn't memorize it, when a meeting takes place, whenever a quorum is present for purpose of deliberating, toward or rendering a decision on a public policy, and all meetings must take place at a forum open to the public. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you're discussing something after the meeting's over, it might even be a minor thing like, well, maybe we should have did this procedure or that procedure. To the public, it might look like you're actually discussing policy, and so the point being is that could be an Open Meetings Act violation. So just if there's something you want to discuss, even if it has nothing to do with the agenda, but anything relating to this board, just make sure it's brought up before the meeting's closed. So that's it. It was just a minor issue that was brought to our attention. So, any questions?
Mr. Lambert.
Just one question. Is it generally preferable to even avoid discussions of business, even if you only had like 2 members present?
To avoid the appearance of impropriety, it's even if you only don't have 2 members. I mean, technically it can't be a meeting unless you have a quorum, but just to be safe, if you hear one of your board members after the meeting's over start talking about something related to this board, you should just interrupt and say, hey, how about those tigers or something like that. Change the subject. So anyway, that's it.
And I just think that's a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Motzny. Whenever, sometimes before or after a meeting, people do congregate to socialize and or just, get to know each other a little bit better. But always be cognizant if there's 3 people. I always like to count. So if you're up to 3 and a quick comment comes up, that's technically legal. But if the 4th member starts approaching that group of 3, then you have to, if someone wants to talk about anything, you have to just split up. And we were doing that before the meeting started. We were making sure that we were not in groups of more than 3, and that would be appropriate. So, but thank you for that, those comments. So we do open up at this time the public comment to anyone who'd like to address the board on any matter either related to the board's business tonight or something that didn't happen related to the board's business tonight. So that is open. I'll open that up, and then if someone would like to be recognized, Ms. Krupa.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that at the last Planning Commission meeting, if you have a chance, please watch it. We had a rezoning request for a piece of land that is by the Troy Sports Center for 247 apartments to be built. Just seeing the number of hotels and apartments that are being built, I just feel like we have a lot of manicured land at Civic Center property. Other people are building, and it's just kind of sad that we didn't. And I also wanted to point out that at I think the last city council meeting, there was a recommendation from a Troy resident that we have a design competition. So if you have a chance, watch both we had a lot of discussion around the concept plan at the Planning Commission meeting, and I believe the comments from this gentleman, this resident, are worth watching, because that also a really good idea. So,
thank you. Mr. Lambert.
One quick question for city staff, and I'm glad Mrs. Cooper brought up that issue. It doesn't relate directly to what I'm going to ask about, but it brought something to mind. That the city council recently adopted some kind of a marijuana control ordinance, and reading a news coverage of it, the people that are suing the city over that were stating that that should have come to the Zoning Board of Appeals in some way of a manner. Mr. Motzny, I think you're probably aware of that, and is there any chance they might come in front of us eventually?
Probably not. But you never know what someone might try. No, the claim actually, the lawsuit was just recently filed. We had, obviously City Council knows, although we haven't did a formal memo to City Council, but it's in the paper. The claim is that the ordinance is technically a zoning ordinance, and therefore it should have gone before the Planning Commission for a public hearing before it went to City Council. Obviously, our argument is it's a regulatory ordinance, not a zoning ordinance, but it is in court now, so we'll see what the judge says. So, but Yeah, as far as coming to this board, I don't think that was mentioned in the lawsuit, so.
Okay.
It's probably a newspaper.
Newspaper article, what?
Yeah.
It's going to be a long night if that's the case.
Get stuff wrong?
I have a question for Ms. Koopa. I didn't really, your first comment about the potential development next to the Troy Sports Arena, were you indicating, because I know this apartment wave has like hit the city now, and are you saying that you would be opposed to apartments? I didn't understand what you're.
So I was just doing my best to point out that there is a wave of apartments being built, and that we had an opportunity to build housing in the Civic Center property.
Instead of the apartment.
Yeah, and we lost the opportunity when we stopped the concept plan from going out, just because that was a concept plan for the Civic Center, the town center. We lost the opportunity to put that out there last year during the whole charter amendment. I don't know where it is now. It's in the hands of City Council. But the second part of that was that somebody suggested that we have a design competition for the Civic Center project. So just to know that that concept plan that we had originally were going to put out there for bids, for an RF, for a request for proposals or request for interest. I don't think it was really request for buildings, development, something, but to show interest. I don't think that, I'm kind of sorry that that didn't go forward, because there's obviously a need for apartments because other people are building them. And so we have this new suggestion that they have a design. I don't know how City Council will take that forward, but it's just there. So as a ZBA, I think it's good for us to all to be informed on what is going on, what developers are bringing forward. I did also want to mention we had a cluster development option come before us. We actually had a public hearing here 2 Planning Commission meetings ago, and we turned that one away. It is over by Ottawa. It's a 6-acre plot of land where by right the builder would be able to build 13 houses. By preserving 30% of the trees on the land, he would be able to build, I think, 16, gain 3 additional units, but they would not be in concert with the surrounding neighborhood, and it would not have fit some of the other requirements that are there in the cluster development option. If you have not read our cluster development option and our tree protection ordinance, please look at those. They're very well crafted, I believe, so that we have a measure. We are also in the process at Planning Commission of working on design standards that we will then send to City Council to approve, because I think we want to see sort of the fabric of the community, stay the fabric of the community, not be stuck when we're in Planning Commission and development plans come before us for approval, that we don't have some guidelines. And so by having design standards, we feel that will help enhance what we have in the master plan. And so that's still in progress, but I would be happy if all of you could take some homework and go look at these, because they're good additions to the city's toolkit, I think, from ordinance perspective.
Great. Anyone else?
Did that clarify your question?
Yeah, I just didn't get what you're trying to say. So I guess when I heard you say the Troy Sports Complex, I must have heard I thought the ice arena, and I'm thinking, well, there's not any property much around there.
There is.
There is, okay.
There is, and they want to build 247 apartments, and we all have...
Oh, so that is what you were referring to. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what and then you switched to the Civic Center, so I kind of thought that you were...
There is a need for apartments, other people are filling in.
Gotcha. All right. Anyone else for public comment? I'm going to close that portion out and bring it back to the table. Is there any other business that the board would like to conduct tonight? Seeing none, we are adjourned until June. See you soon.